I'm Thomas Pope. I'm the head of property cybersecurity for JLL, which is Jones Lang LaSalle. We do commercial real estate, everything under the sun, just about whatever you can think of. Some of you are probably my client and you don't know it. But anyways, I want to talk more about buildings and properties and the work that goes into them from an engineering perspective, cybersecurity, things like that. So my talk is there's more to buildings than meets the eye. A lot of times they're nice and shiny and pretty. But what you don't see is all that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot to making a building work, run efficiently. So I'm going to talk through some of that. All right, click. So first thing I want to cover is terminology, right? So there's OT, IoT, and IIoT. And unfortunately, these are conflated a lot of times, which makes someone like me, my job, very difficult because they don't have the same requirements. They're very different. So I'm not going to read all this off, but essentially OT is very purpose-driven, engineered for a specific reason, industrial process. Internet of Things, normally more consumer-based. A lot of times, that's where you're going to run into your Alexa, your coffee pot, your fridge that tells you when you need to restock the milk. And then there's the industrial Internet of Things. So this is making a huge play inside of buildings. And this is where people normally say IoT. They really mean IIoT. So a simple one for me is air quality sensors. That's something that, goes in these buildings. They want to make sure the air you're breathing is good. They need to tune the HVAC, things like that. Same with occupancy sensors. So they just want to know if people are on a floor. That helps physical security, and it also helps the company know if they're doing their spaces properly. It's kind of outside normal consumer, and it fits more into offices and buildings and things like that. So, the typical systems that you'll see in buildings, it depends on the complexity of the building. If you're talking about a strip mall, it's going to be very small. Talking about, a big Mall of America, something like that, a lot bigger. Same with, an 80-story office building, right? So you're going to have the building management system, which normally hooks in the HVAC, the lighting, the fire, life, and safety, any other systems that they can hook up to it. Sometimes there'll be, air quality and things like that as well. You got energy management. The ones that kind of fall by the wayside are the ones we forget about. The elevators and escalators, definitely operational technology. Parking systems, the little door that opens when you swipe your card. Operational technology. We need to keep that in mind when we're talking about, what all goes into a building and being, mindful of those things. So one thing that I like to talk about is owning versus managing. So with what I do, I actually don't own very many buildings. And it might be the case for you all as well. So when you own a property, you have carte blanche to essentially do what you want, right? You can say, I don't like this system, I don't like this vendor, rip it all out and replace it. You have that ability. And the principal, the actor, it all falls on you as far as liability and things in that place. You can flow that down to your subcontractors, but that's not always the case, right? And then managing, right? You have to work what's there. Say you hire a commercial real estate company to manage your property. Well, we have to work with you. There's no, hey, this is the way it should be, rip this out, do this, put this technology in. It doesn't work like that. So there's more of a shared model, where we're trying to inform, but we're not trying to, dictate or mandate things, right? It's more influence. So one thing, out of this, right, I'm going to have advice here and there as we're going through, is find out if I own the building, who's managing it. Is it all in-house? Is it split? Those are the things you need to consider. And that leads me, to some of this that is going to be in the next few slides. But in this one, I kind of wanted to talk about architectures that I see. So I've been assessing properties and going through the portfolio, working on these to understand what these buildings look like. And they're across all different sectors, right? Commercial, retail, industrial. But for the most part, they can be pretty segmented, not too bad. You hope there's more, right? More firewalls, more separation, more aligning processes. So, the HVAC system doesn't necessarily need to talk to the elevator, right? Like it shouldn't be completely flat. But at least there's some segmentation between what's happening on the IT side of a building, which in a lot of cases, a building is unto itself. I don't know if people know that or not, but there aren't big callbacks to a larger entity. A lot of times a building is kind of on its own. So they have their own, where you're talking about the management network, they have their own Active Directory, they have their own print servers, they have everything they need to function in that small space, along with, actually facilitating people to manage the property. There's also the physical security component of it, right? Along with the radio networks. This is how, you actually get the functioning of, looking at security cameras and alarms being tripped, things like that. A lot of times the fire, life, and safety will go in there as well, if that's, how the responsibilities are divvied up. And then you get to more of the protected things, talking about the BMS, so building management system. Over there is where you have your actuators working on the HVAC, working on the lighting, all of those systems. That's where you get into that core OT technology. And depending on the complexity, right, there are other systems, like I said, talking about water and backup power generators, things like that. I mean, I used to work for Duke Energy, and one of the buildings had a giant generator in the bottom of it, and it acted as a transmission substation as well. So those are things you're not going to see if you're not inside the building. So you just see a nondescript building, and it's not very impressive, right? So it's not until you dig in that you find out more. And that's way at a lot of other properties too, right? You're not going to know that, oh, there's all this water infrastructure in here. There's all this, internet infrastructure in here. You're not going to know those things. So once you start digging in, you can find out more, like what actually happens at my property. I don't know. And that's where you start doing that. And then the next one is unfortunately another common one that I see. It's where everything's kind of slapped together. The management network, physical security, pretty much everything is together except for the OT components. And those actually have their own internet connection, and they do not have a firewall in place. There are almost no controls as far as security. And even a lot of times when a firewall is there, sometimes management ports are exposed that shouldn't be, right? Along with some other things, just through some of my work, whether it's for, internal or external, we find HVAC systems exposed to the internet directly, even though there's a firewall there, it's been configured improperly. So you can get right to it. It's the old adage with Shodan, you can look, but don't touch. So you can see that there's a management console on the other side of it. You just don't go into it. So a lot of times you will experience these because of third-party integrators, right? They are so many, and talking about that further down the line, it creates a mixed matrix of responsibilities and who's actually responsible for securing this, for doing the IT work for this. Is it the building? Is it another group? Is it a contractor? And it gets very hairy. And a lot of times it's not well documented. That's something that needs to occur, whether it's, someone like me on my side, or the vendor, or, the actual owner of the property needs to be doing those things. So when we talk about assessing a property, you're going to go in there, you're going to try and figure out what's happening. Think of the scope. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you looking for only things that you manage? Are you looking for the entirety of the property? Are you only looking what your third-party connections are, what your third-party relationships are? Who are those contractors, subcontractors doing this work in your facility? The other is to work with engineering and the business side of it. what is that building actually used for? Is it one purpose? Is it multi-purpose? Are there other tenants there? Are there plans to? Is there some old piece of infrastructure that people don't want to talk about? Right? Like, internet lines running through it, being a major conduit for a city, or a section of a city, or a country or a state, depending on, where in the world you are. And the same with engineering, right? They're going to have the understanding of what systems are in that building. They're going to understand who all the contractors are, and help you build out from the way things work to securing them. Because in a lot of cases, you bring up security, what do you have for, AV or EDR, and they're like, I don't know, man. So, right, they have their expertise and you have yours. You work with them, everybody's going to be better for it. The other thing to do is collect documentation. If it doesn't exist, create it. A lot of times an asset inventory is created once and it's no longer updated. It needs to be refreshed. New things get added on, things get replaced, things get ripped out. You could be expecting to see a piece of equipment that's no longer there and nobody wrote it down. And then you go ask somebody, whether it's, engineering or a vendor, and they say, oh, that's right. Yeah, we did do that. You didn't write it down. Yeah, I know. So you got to get them to do it. One of those that gets to me is documentation is not a service. You should definitely be asking them to do these. This is part of, the work. And it's really important from security. I'll talk about it later on. But when I was doing incident response, it was invaluable to have this documentation of what these systems are, what constitutes their interactions between systems, if there are any security controls in place, and then who owns those. All of those things are really important. And that kind of gets into the areas of responsibility. Who's responsible for that parking system? Is it physical security? Is it you? Is it split between IT, cyber, physical? How does that happen? Same thing with the PACs, the physical access control system. That is the number one thing that causes a fight everywhere I've ever worked, is who owns the PACs? It's like, well, I own the physical security and the software, but I'm not owning the infrastructure. And I'm not owning, the badge reader. Somebody else has to do that. Somebody has to do the cybersecurity piece of it. That's not me. Or somebody wants to own all of it, and maybe they shouldn't. So it really depends on what works for you, inside of whatever your model of responsibility is. I'm not one of those that I want to own everything, but I at least want to know something's being done. And having those conversations is important. Same with engineering and like the business, as I was saying. And then plan it out, right? Don't just show up. That's not helpful for anybody. You could be going in the middle of a P1 incident, right? That they're having at the facility, or the right person might not be there, or you needed to talk to a vendor and not actually the engineering people. Things like that, right? And then what are you going to do with all this information? Are you going to create anything? Or are you just going to store it all in one place? And it's really figuring out, what do I need to do? Do I need to have a physical walk down of the building? Do I just need to plug a box in, right? I was saying, plug whatever vendor box into the network and it'll, do the asset inventory for us. Is that what you want to do? If so, that's fine. Can you be more active? Do you want to do vulnerability scanning and things like that? It's good to figure out what you want to do and what to produce, because just going is nice. You'll learn more. You'll be better for it. The engineering folks might be better for it, but is the company better for it? And that's one of the things that have to be considered every time you're doing this. So these next three are talking about attacks in the wild. I'm not going to go too deep into these first two. I just want to call them out because of how they tie back into OT. So the target breach, very well known, very widely known. The only part that I like to be clear on is the HVAC company that had the credentials into Target, it was not their HVAC system. They were not hooked into the BMS or anything like that. They were actually into a portal for paying bills and things like that. And that's how Target got hacked. So that's one that I always like to be clear about, because people treat it as an OT breach, and it's like, well, not really. It was a third-party integrator maintenance company, but it didn't come in through any of the OT systems. The lessons to apply, you're going to see these multiple times. But if they had MFA, that would have stopped it pretty quick. Or complex password likely helps with these as well, unless they're cracking on the box as they rip them. The other is to only give accounts what they need. If they're very low level access, there's probably not much they can pivot to in the network. So give them exactly what they need, and that's it. And then segment the network. The network was very flat to be able to get from that portal into all of the POS systems to pull those credit cards and all the associated information. It had to be not well segmented. We'll leave it at that. The other one, this is my favorite IoT one, is to talk about the fish tank thermometer. It led to a breach at a casino. This is one that I always think is kind of interesting. I don't want to laugh, right? But it's pretty inventive, and something that, at that point in 2017, I can't say many people thought of. I didn't even know you could have an IoT fish tank thermometer. So that was really interesting. But again, they had a flat network. The attacker was able to pivot through the network and exfiltrate data. The other interesting thing was the exfil was done with streaming protocols. So it looked like audio video, which don't necessarily stick out until you say, oh, what is an IoT thermometer doing with audio visual? That's kind of odd. So things like that, know what these devices are supposed to be doing. Change the default credentials. I'm not in depth with this, right? Because I wasn't there. But I would be happy to bet a sizable amount of money that there were default credentials on that thermometer that were not changed. And then, limit the access to only what's needed. If you don't need any internal access for this thermometer, don't do it. Or if you need very limited, just put an ACL around it. It's not a big deal. Put it on a separate VLAN or subnet. So at least it sticks out. VLAN, of course, is not security, but it's still good for monitoring to say, this has no reason to be talking to anything else. So any alerts should stick out. Again, segmenting the network. It's, going to be a broken record, right? If you do that, things are going to be better. And then again, limit only to what is needed. Why was this able to pivot throughout the network? Doesn't make much sense. This one's more recent. This is the one that's really interesting to me and buildings. So KNX Lock. This was activity that was disclosed in December of last year. KNX is a building management systems framework. It allows for more plug and play ability of devices. So, a lot of times when you put in a particular OEM, you are married to their ecosystem. You can only put in devices from them or from, a specific partner of theirs, whereas KNX allows you to get around that. I say all that to say some of the open-endedness that they put in there was used against them. They actually did put security into their system by having a BCU key, which was essentially at system level. So when you set it, it essentially adds that layer of security to say, you have to have this to operate the device. Well, it wasn't set. So the attacker got into the system, set the BCU key, locked the operators completely out. They were only able to work in manual mode. There was nothing they could do about it. The vendor also said, there's nothing we can do about this. It is what it is at this point. So it actually had to be reverse engineered to pull the key from memory to get the password. It wasn't ransomware though. They locked it up. They did not ask for ransom. This happened from talking to a couple folks at dozens of sites over in the EU. So this could become more commonplace. Maybe they were testing it out. I can't tell you. But at the same time, it was extremely powerful, being able to lock operators out of the building management system. So HVAC, lighting, a lot of times, other systems like doors, fire, life, and safety are all controlled by that central system. Now, what do? It's not good. You have to have that backup plan, right? But again, there had to be, well, not had to be, from talking to them, there was direct internet access to the KNX gateway. Not good, right? So again, segment the network. Don't let them do that. The other is if there is security in place, set it, use it every time. Don't let anybody out of it, right? If the vendor puts it in a certain way, well, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you have the ability, turn it on. Turn on whatever security features are there. And again, if you aren't managing your building, get the company that is to do it. Say, have you done this work? And if they can't answer that, that's a problem. But then they should be able to put you on a roadmap to say, yes, we can do X, Y, Z, right? So if you're not being the, acting as the property manager or, facilities management for your building, you need to talk to them about it. Some cases that might end up being me, right? So I may be creating more work for myself, but that's okay. Because at the end of the day, we want to be more secure and help everybody with that. The other is to monitor for non-standard traffic. This is that anomaly detection, but a lot of times you can tune it down really low. A lot of the data that you'll see traversing the firewall coming from the internet is going to be massive. The management network is going to have huge amounts of traffic. Once you get down to the BMS and the other OT systems, that traffic should be very light. It should be much easier to pick out things that shouldn't be occurring. Same with, inbound, outbound. You should be able to pick that out pretty easily. I know there are some questions here. I'm going to try and speed up a little bit, but I'll try to get to them as I go. So things that you should put in place, right? Some of this seems odd, or not odd. It seems simple, but this is what needs to happen. I've already seen this multiple sites, and a lot of times it's not anything that I can correct. It's the building owner or someone else doing it, because I don't own that. And what you need to do is figure out if you do. So restrict the internet access, only what's needed. Put a firewall in place. It seems simple, but in a lot of cases, it's not. It's not there. Segment the network. It seems simple, right? You're like, we already do that. You need to check. You might not be doing that. A lot of cases, if you're allowing a building to come back into your corporate network, that's kind of dangerous, because you don't know what the vendors down at the building level have actually done. So it can get scary depending on how you segmented the internet and the connections between them. Require MFA, that's always my favorite from my incident response days. That would have stopped so many incidents that I responded to. They've been like, oh, we had MFA. It's like, okay, we were popped and we stopped them. Oh, okay, well, you don't need me then. And it was over pretty quickly. Attackers have a much harder time, and the sophistication goes up significantly once they're trying to breach MFA. Change the default passwords. Again, simple, right? There was a report that CISA put out recently about, I think it was UPS systems having default credentials and being attacked because of it. Again, why is UPS exposed to the internet? I can't answer that for you. It's not good though. Put complex passwords in place where possible. It takes a long time to crack it. There are the little pictures that you can find on the internet. But anything I think over 15 or 16 characters and it's complex, man, good luck. It's not going to get cracked. Somebody's going to have to scrape it from memory. But just getting the hash, nah, they're not going to do it. And then actually log things. I've encountered multiple places where they have a firewall in place or they have an AV. Nobody looks at it, or it's not actually logged. That's something else that needs to be turned on or done at a different level. That doesn't do you much good. Not in the long run. IR planning and execution. So this is one of my favorites because I did IR for a while. I've responded to a lot of IT and OT incidents. Um, these are things that you have to do for both. What do you do when there's an emergency at your property? Do you have plans in place for that? Do you have playbooks? Do you have a listing of the folks that need to know about it? Sort of the RACI for it. Do you have those things? I won't say people don't. I will just say, in my experience, that has not been the case. They have it for IT, and they might have it for OT when you're talking about the energy management system, or you're talking about the PCN for doing the oil distillation and all that, doing the cracking. Um, those are in place, but when you talk about the building itself, that's rarely considered. It's and unless it's owned and all the networking is through your company, that's a struggle. You got to figure out who owns what and all those things. Same with the accounting of what's there. Is there anything I can use that's in place? Do I have any connectivity in to do these things? So if there's an incident, how do I even collect data? A lot of times, how would I run a tool on this system? How do I tell an engineer how to do that? Do you have a playbook to show them and say, here, I will send you the EXE, do these steps 1 through 8, and send me the data back, and have a way for them to send you the data back. Because in a lot of cases, these are very technical people in a different way. In engineering, they're not technical in the ways of IT and cyber. So you got to help them along. They're still smart folks. That's just not what they do day to day. And then again, people. Do you have anyone that can execute this stuff? Whether that's on a workstation, like an engineering workstation, or on an HMI, a PLC, the BMS. Do you have this ability? Do you have people in place that would feel confident doing it? Are they going to be afraid that they're going to make stuff worse? And it's sort of the paralysis for acting. At what point can you actually get anything done? And this happens in the IT side of things too, all the time. I was an incident commander, and I would have to come in, and in a nice way, right? Say, go do this, give me this, I'll give you this, and sort of orchestrate what's going on. And you have to have the people available to do that, or the vendor available to do that. So whether that's a third-party IR provider or something like that, you need to have these folks sort of along for the ride with you. And then down to simple things. Have we ever done a business continuity exercise? Have we ever restored from backups? Do we have backups? Do we just back up data? Do we back up configs? And then doing a tabletop around it and saying, if this happens, what do you do? Ask the engineer. You hope the answer is I pick up the phone and call whomever to help me through this. Or if they're technically competent from a cyber perspective, they can say, oh, I know to go look at this. I know to go here and do these things. And the other is to do a penetration test. It's one of those where we're talking about sensitive systems and things like that. There are times when buildings aren't occupied. Pen testers don't like working at 2 a.m, but if nobody's there, is that the biggest deal in the world? If something goes down, I don't think so. What matters is that you have the ability to recover. Because again, if you go down from a penetration test, what's the difference between if a good guy's doing it and a bad guy? Only that one didn't mean to do it. You still have to be able to recover from doing those things. And then my last slide, I also have one with citations on it, but I'm not going to read those to you. Defense is doable. I mean, all this stuff is possible. It's one of those where if you don't try, you're never going to be able to accomplish anything. Can't say it's too hard. Like, well, it is hard, but you got to do something. Otherwise, the bad guys are going to win. Your luck only runs for so long. So know your network, know what's going on, what's plugged in. Do I own this? Is that under someone else's purview? Do they have a VPN tunnel to it? Is there a jump box to it? Map those things out, have an architectural diagram, make sure somebody has Visio uh, or something to be able to do this. Uh, know your defenses. Do I have anything in place? Do I log anything? If I don't, do I have some scripts that I can have somebody run to pull something for me? When you're talking about Windows hosts, right? Maybe Windows Defender's turned on. There should be some PowerShell logging and WMI logging happening. Might not be the best, but it's something, right? Know who all your partners are. So when I say partner, I'm more thinking about, your business partners and the engineers. Who are the people at these facilities that I can rely on to fill me in where I am not knowledgeable, right? You can't know everything, and you shouldn't, right? It's good to rely on others and use their expertise so you can focus on other things. Make sure you have them on speed dial, right? Like I got a phone call from a property manager the other day because he got a weird email. I'm not the right person, but I'm glad he trusted me enough to do that because it's better than going, well, I don't know, I'll just click it and see what happens, hashtag YOLO, right? And then the other is know your vendors. I mean, some of these places, depending on the building you're in, there could be 60 plus vendors. And it's good to know who they are and what they're actually doing in your facility. And then know your own capabilities. It's extremely important to know what's going on inside of your own teams. Can people do this work? If not, what can we do to augment that? Do we need to hire somebody? Is there, a third party we can have on retainer to help us? And there shouldn't be any shame with that either. Anyways, that's all I have. I have a slide of citations as well, but we don't need to go through that. I do have one question in the chat. It says, do you believe insurers have a role to incentivize investments in cyber safety enhancements in smart buildings? There has been some of that. I know there are a few vendors that are trying to go that way, that say, if you put our system in place, you will be insured. Because it's, in some cases, cyber insurance has gone up, 400, 500, 600% because of what's happening in the real world. And it's been that way with IR as well. You should already have someone in mind and have all your ducks in a row to do it. And all those things that I'm talking about, if you have, an inventory of what's going on, all your systems, things like that, it makes it easier as far as, insurance and things like that. They have a role to play, but I would say, I hope you never need them and that you're doing what you need to do, and that whatever impact you have is so minimal, you don't need it. So I don't know how much more time I have, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I can also answer them offline as well. Not a big deal. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time, and have a good rest of your day.